Hello again, and welcome back to Illegally Cited. This is BGFH, and I am back for another, hopefully it will be a quick video this time. This is just going to be one of those little bonus videos for a couple of different reasons. First, just kind of a quick channel update. I noticed as I was uploading and unlocking content the other day that, the channel has just reached and exceeded 700 subscribers, which is pretty awesome. I think we were just actually hitting 600, if I remember correctly, right around the end of 2016, give or take a little bit of time there. But already broke 700, which is pretty awesome, pretty amazing. So thanks for all that. Thanks for the views. Thanks for the subscribes. And keep them coming. And hopefully you're finding the channel interesting, entertaining, or whatever. I'm trying to mix things up quite a bit as far as do some low vision stuff, some blind accessible stuff, some hardware reviews, some VR content, and whatever else I can kind of think of. Really got to do a couple more of those geek loot videos. I've been sitting on some of that stuff for a while that I have yet to record, but so 700 and going strong. So thanks for that, you guys. Pretty cool. Anyway, just wanted to pop in and give my thoughts really quick about Microsoft's Build conference over the last couple of days. They had their annual Build conference, which, for a lot of people are familiar with Apple's WWDC in June every year, which is coming up right around the corner, believe it or not. Microsoft does a similar type of event. This time it was this week. And I listened to the first keynote, not super closely, but kind of had it on in the background while I was working. It was like a 3-hour session that was really, the whole conference is geared toward developers, but that was more like, business end and cloud stuff. And there's a couple little tidbits in there that were kind of interesting. But really today, I'm recording this on Thursday, the 11th, I think. But anyway, they had a couple-hour session, hour and a half, 2-hour session this morning, and there's some really interesting stuff coming for Windows. And so I just wanted to kind of give my thoughts on. This isn't going to be a definitive summary of the event. There are gazillions of tech websites and podcasts and things that will be covering that in just detail, but there are a lot of things I think that stood out to me. And one of the most promising things I think is both Microsoft and Google. They kind of just have this more openness to them. Apple, I love my iPhone, I love my iPad, but some of the stuff that can be really frustrating is like, you can't have certain types of apps, or you can't do certain types of tasks because, it's got to be done the Apple way. It's got to be done their way. You can't have apps that, use the hardware in a certain way or do a certain type of task like direct feed video recording, perhaps, those types of things. You can't really have like direct file system transfer. Those are the two major things that I think that I would love to see most as far as Apple functionality. But then you have like Google and Apple, or Google and Android. Good Lord, Google and Microsoft. And Microsoft especially, like when Satya Nadella took over, you can definitely tell a huge turn in Microsoft's kind of whole philosophy. And I think it's great. I think it's exactly what they needed. They seem to be really running on all cylinders as far as like, they're really promoting accessibility. They want their stuff to be open. They're not just trying to get you like, hey, buy Windows, buy Office, and that's what we're going to do. And Microsoft, Xbox. Basically, they're creating these services and software and environments, and they're basically like, we just want you to use our stuff. we know that you're going to have, they kept coming back to this in the whole keynote was like, we know people have multiple devices, and we know they're not all Microsoft devices, especially when you go toward the portable end, because Windows Phone, that's pretty much dead at this point. I mean, they mention it a couple of times, but mainly when they were demoing mobile stuff, they were showing Android and iOS. So, I mean, they know it. I mean, yeah, okay, the mobile space didn't work out for them. So I love their philosophy. They're just more open, and they're kind of going more with, yeah, you want to use Office, you want to use, OneDrive, you want to use Outlook, you want to use whatever. Yeah, go ahead and do it on Windows, do it on Android, iOS, whatever. And that brings me into couple of the cooler things that they talked about. I don't remember what the name that they gave it really, but they had something similar to what iOS was doing a couple of years ago, where if you're in the Apple ecosystem, you had this connectivity, between Mac and iPad and iPhone, where like, oh, I can start up a task and on my Mac and then go over to my phone or my iPad and continue sort of right where I left off. Like, oh, I notice that the most when I go from my phone to my iPad and I have my Safari tabs. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, this phone was working on that. Do I want to just pick that right up? I can get if I'm working on my iPad, but my phone is nearby and I get a phone call, yeah, sometimes it'll come up on my iPad and I can just answer it via speakerphone if I want to. Well, Microsoft is doing kind of a similar thing, except, again, the openness is really cool because they're saying, yeah, you want to do it with the Surface, you want to do it with a Windows tablet or a laptop or a desktop computer, great. But we're also going to try to do it with Android and iOS. So they're going to be using basically Cortana. Cortana and OneDrive, it seem like they're going to be the two main bridges between Microsoft and the rest of the world, which actually could be intriguing with like some of the scenarios that they played out. And I might have to really seriously be giving OneDrive a better look because I've used it a little bit, but I haven't really, I've kind of done Dropbox just because, I don't know, that's what we started with, and it's worked fine. But with OneDrive, like they were showing, oh, you can have your documents, your files, whatever. They'll be in the cloud, and they'll all show up, including the file sizes of where they are on the cloud, but they won't necessarily download to your device until you click or tap on them, and then you're going to be able to, just download them locally to whatever device you're working on and continue working, and it'll just kind of put you right where you left off working, which is cool. And then they had this cloud clipboard, which again, Apple was talking about something similar where like I can copy something on my Mac and paste it on my phone or vice versa. Well, again, that's going to be very similar, except you're going to do it through your computer or your phone, or it's not tied to just Microsoft stuff or Microsoft's platforms. So I don't know. It might be sort of interesting to see how, the example they gave was like, oh, how many of you have emailed yourself a file or some text or something that you wanted just because that was the easiest way to get it from your computer to your phone or your portable device? And we're like, do that all the time. So they're kind of hoping to have just like a copy and paste kind of a thing as well through the cloud. And so, yeah, I mean, it'll be really interesting to see how that works out, because, with Apple, I have an iPhone, of course, and I have an iPad. And, Android, you can kind of customize, oh, do I want Firefox to be my default browser? Do I want Chrome? Do I want, whatever? You can kind of pick and choose what you want for your defaults. Same with Microsoft. Apple, again, you can, I have the Cortana app. I have the Google app, but if I wanted to replace, let's say, Siri as replace Siri as the default assistant, since because Siri's gotten kind of dumb lately, could I replace that and say, hey, I'd like to use Cortana when I hold the home button down? You can't do that. They're just that closed ecosystem. So I'm curious to see if and how Microsoft is kind of getting around Apple's limitations, and still, if Microsoft is going to be able to provide some extra little functionality, even though you can't necessarily make it the default assistant or default app for different things. And who knows, maybe Apple will just shock the hell out of us next month and be like, oh yeah, I guess everyone else is open. I guess we got to be more open too. I highly, highly, highly doubt it, but there's a very slim chance. So that was a couple of really interesting things. Then they have like basically an upgraded, basically an image and movie maker sort of a thing. I forget what the thing is called, but they showed us some examples of it, and it's basically like Windows Movie Maker on crack, and it seems kind of fun to play with actually. Who knows? Maybe eventually, if I do more editing of a different type of video for the channel, I might play with some of that stuff. We had the spring update, the spring creators update in March, and we have the fall creators update. So they're continuing to go with the creators update this year. So that's probably we're looking at maybe September, maybe October, somewhere in there. But they're still kind of going with the creative theme. So basically, they're looking at this fluid design, kind of changing the way that Windows looks a little bit different. A little focus on depth and color and size and scale and just all these different. They kind of focused on like 4 or 5 different things. Some of that stuff I'm kind of curious as a low vision user how that's going to go, especially the transparency stuff, because some of that can be, if you have kind of a busy underlying, let's say a wallpaper, and some of that bleeds through some transparency, that could be a little bit harder to see. But then, they're also doing some great stuff with accessibility. So, that's, I think it'll probably be okay because they seem to be considering both sides of that. They got the updated movie maker kind of a thing. And the really neat effects. Like basically, they showed this example where they were showing a video of a school soccer team, and they were focused on this one girl. So they were putting like captions and like pinning the caption to the girl so that if she was moving through the video, the caption would actually follow her. And then they did a really neat thing at the end where they were like, okay, she scored the winning goal. So they took and they looked for some of these community effects that people would do, and they did this like fireball one. And so when she was kicking the ball into the net, they showed this. They basically pinned this fireball effect to the ball, and so it was a regular ball. She kicks it into the goal, and it's just like an NBA, right out of NBA Jam, or some of those arcadey sports games where like as she kicks the ball, it just starts on fire and goes into the net, which is really cool. So some interesting little things like that, being able to do some pretty neat special effects with little to no effort whatsoever. So yeah. The other thing, the main thing that I was super interested in, I mean, there's a lot of Windows stuff. There's some of this connectivity, some of the new look stuff. The movie. I don't know how much I'll use it, but I think it's kind of a neat thing that they're doing. Where I got excited is they started talking mixed reality again, and that could be virtual reality and or augmented reality. And you all know that I'm pretty into virtual reality at this point, having a Oculus Rift for just under a year now, and I really love it. I mean, it has its problems, just in general, but more so if you're low vision, such as myself. Interface and interface elements and UI, text, menus. Those are the things I'm finding that give me the most problem in virtual reality. And interestingly, before I go on to Microsoft's mixed reality thing, just a really quick note that I found really interesting. I actually had a friend and coworker stop by last weekend after Friday after work, and it was really interesting because he is low vision like myself, but he has better vision than I do. But I think his depth perception might not be quite as pronounced as mine. So there are things that I can see better than he can, but there's a lot of things that he can see better that I can't. And one of the interesting things was is that he had a little more trouble with depth in VR, where I might not have had as much trouble there. But he was able to, a lot of the menus that I've talked about in other videos, I showed him Job Simulator. That's not too bad. But, I showed him Job Simulator. We looked at Fruit Ninja. Those are the pretty good ones. But then we went into, like, some of the video apps, where you're looking at menus and grids of, thumbnails and things. Or you're looking at, I'm trying to remember, I know we looked at, like Space Pirate Trainer. I've covered that on the channel. And we looked at probably a good half dozen to a dozen games and experiences, and I had him look at a few things that were, that had a fair amount of text in them, and I was like, I can't read this text. Can you? And he could read them. And what I found that was more interesting was that, he normally wears glasses. And he wasn't able to really wear the glasses in the headset in the Rift because it wasn't super comfortable. But he could still, like, with the way that the image was projected really close in front of your eye, he didn't need glasses. He was able to read text that I couldn't even, I could see was there, but that I couldn't read. So, there were things that actually VR really helped with him in some ways that he could see better in VR than he could on a flat screen. So, which is a little bit different to how my vision works. So, it's actually really interesting to see how, even with, with different vision impairments, the range of things that will and won't work as well. So, we must have messed up with that off and on for a few hours last Friday night, and it was, like I said, it was really interesting, not only to get get someone else's perspective on VR in general, but somebody who also has low vision, and just seeing what works for them, what doesn't, and comparing it to the knowledge that I've built up over the past year or so. So, I may be referring to more of that in the future, on some of these accessibility videos and stuff, but so that was kind of interesting. But boy, getting back to Microsoft, we're getting close to the, we're going to wrap up here pretty quickly, but Microsoft, let me tell you, if they can do a couple of key things, I might be buying another headset by the end of the year. So they talked about mixed reality. And so you have virtual reality, which is, of course, what you've seen on the channel. Like you have your Google Cardboard, your Gear VR, and then your Oculus Rift, or Vive, or PlayStation VR. You're basically blocking off the world, and you're entering into a virtual space. Then you have augmented reality, which is kind of like, you can have, let's say you're wearing glasses or a camera or something, and you're looking at the actual real world, but you're projecting some something, some fake thing or some digital thing into the real world. So, like, let's say I could look at my desk, and I could see, like, a little character walking around on my desk. I couldn't reach out and touch it, but I could see this model walking around on my desk, or I could see something floating in midair, or whatever it is. So it could be it could be a game, but it could be educational. They're doing like doctor stuff where you can look at the human body. There were on the Microsoft. They also talked about like Japan Airway, I think it was, where they were teaching people how to repair jet engines virtually because it takes too much space, and then you're not, with the real thing, you have to take engines and parts out of commission so that people can learn. But in a virtual reality environment, you can actually do that, or an augmented reality environment, you can do that. So there's those kinds of things. And so what was really surprising is, we've known that they've had HoloLens. They've been talking up HoloLens for, a couple of years now. And it seems to be still geared more toward the really high-end business and, creative market. But they are going to theoretically be coming out with some consumer grade VR slash AR headsets by the end of the year. And what caught my interest is a couple of different things. So remember, with the Oculus Rift and the Vive and the PlayStation VR, all these things are wired, tethered to your computer or your game console. And you have to have some form of camera system. With the Rift, with the touch controllers now, I have two infrared cameras, one on either side of my monitor, that track my headset and my hands when I use the touch controllers in virtual space. Now, interestingly, these headsets that Microsoft are going to be coming out with, they're maybe not quite as high end as the Vive or the Rift, but they're going to be better than your, Google Cardboard and probably Gear VR. And what's really interesting about it is that they're going to be all self-contained, and they're using a term called, inside out tracking. So essentially the cameras are actually on the headset itself. And so it somehow just tracks where your head is. Like, it knows with your accelerometers and things, like when you turn your head or you look up and down, it'll track that. But if your hands are in view, let me switch on over to another tab here. We got a Microsoft thing here. Let me zoom in just so you can see a good view. Whoa, that's kind of high. How you doing? You're doing pretty big there. Let's zoom out a little bit. So you've got this headset here. And so you have the cameras, but they also are going to have their own motion controllers. And they remind me a lot of the Oculus Touch, to be honest with you. If I go back, I was doing an image search. Let me just click on something here. Yeah, let's look at that here. So looks like we've got, look at it, it's got even the little whole round things, just like the Touch does. You got, but this one is different because you got an analog stick on each thing. But then it looks like they're almost like the Steam controller. It doesn't look like it has buttons per se, or a D-pad, but instead it's got some sort of weird touch surface, kind of like the Steam controllers, where you almost like a touchpad surface. I haven't really found a good picture of that one because you can see the analog stick sticking up, but it's not facing us, so we can't really see the full top edge of that controller. But so I find it really interesting, with this headset, I won't have to be tied down to my computer, or theoretically even, I won't even have to be tied to this little corner where I've been doing all my VR stuff. If I need to go over to where in front of my couch and my big TV, even just to give myself a little more breathing room, a little bit more play space, I should be able to do that. Wireless, and who knows how well it'll work, but yeah, it should be really interesting to find out. So Microsoft has announced they're partnering with Acer, and what was the other one? HP, I think. And the Acer, there's going to be around the holidays sometime. They haven't said exactly when, but around the holidays they said the Acer setup with the headset and the motion controllers is going to be $400. Which, yeah, seems really interesting. The other reason I'm highly considering another VR AR headset, because I think this is going to be, where you can see things in the real world as well as what's under the VR headset. I don't know the combination of, like, is it all VR? Are you still going to be able to, like, look through the headset and see the real world, or does it have two different modes? I don't know. But what's interesting is when they were talking about this whole augmented reality and virtual reality thing, they want to make basically this standardized. They want to have standards and kind of a consistent, look and feel to interfaces and things like that. And with the way Microsoft is going with Windows 10 and Xbox One accessibility, they just announced that thing at GDC with the whole text-to-speech API, where games and apps and things are going to be able to use more of text-to-speech and speech-to-text. I actually contacted Microsoft Accessibility Twitter account earlier today and asked them, I'm like, hey, do you guys know anything about this? API, or about the mixed reality headset, and if they're going to be starting with any level of accessibility, because if it does, this is probably going to be a day one purchase for me, just to support somebody who's actually thinking about accessibility from the beginning. And they said they did reply to me, and they said they didn't really have any specific answers yet, but they will. They said, if you want to, we'll forward your information to the crew, and say that you're really interested in that. And I asked, like, hey, if you guys need any consulting, or if you need any help, or, like, if I can somehow help and test for some of this interface accessibility, I would love to do it. So I don't know, maybe not, but I put my name out there, I put the word out there, I asked about it, so maybe at least if they weren't thinking about it before, at least the accessibility team, hopefully they can get in contact with the augmented and virtual reality teams, and keep this accessibility train rolling with this, like I said, with Windows 10 and Xbox One. You've got all this stuff that are shared, kind of some of the shared backbone of it. You have narrator, you have some magnifier and stuff in both of them, other accessibility features. So again, I kept thinking, well, if anyone's going to do it, maybe Apple. If they come out with an augmented or virtual reality system, maybe they would be the ones to do anything with accessibility, because Valve and Oculus, I've contacted Oculus a few different times and suggested and requested different things, and basically I just get an automated, oh yeah, well, I mean, sometimes they didn't even get like they thought it was troubleshooting and wasn't seen, or like that I couldn't access something. I'm like, did you even read my email? Because you get these canned replies, and it's just like, oh God, okay. But I don't know. Maybe Microsoft is going to be the one to start the VR and AR accessibility thing, because they've also had this video. They showed it last year of this guy. They had these glasses. I don't even remember what the project is called, but it looks cool as hell. Either using an app, kind of like your KNFB reader or image recognizer, but then you have these glasses where you basically just tap your glasses and it'll be like, oh, I see two people and one looks bored, or one looks really interested, or you hear some noise and he's like, oh, I think that's a guy doing a trick on a skateboard, or so there's going to be I think Microsoft's going to be doing some really interesting stuff in the next few years. So we're definitely going to watch, going to have to watch them. And I know Apple's been doing a really good job, and they really kind of started the whole accessibility thing. But don't count these other guys out. We're getting competition. We're getting some really interesting stuff, both with Google and with Microsoft. So kudos to them. And by the way, before we wrap up, I will just say one more thing. The other thing that I was really impressed with is they actually devoted a couple of minutes to accessibility right in today's keynote, where they were talking about development environments and different things, to where they brought up narrator, and they're like, hey, we want our products to be, not only available on every device, but so that everybody can use them. Hey, we actually have a lot of blind and visually impaired users who would like to work in these environments too. And they brought up narrator, and they showed the narrator development mode, where essentially it blacks out the screen and makes the developer have to use the computer like a totally blind or very, really visually impaired person would have to, looking at things sequentially and just seeing what's in focus, and having to actually listen to what's being read. Does that make sense in context? So, they demonstrated that a little bit, which I thought was, what, in a main keynote conference, not just on a side panel. That's excellent. I'm really glad they did that. So kudos to you guys for that. Oh yeah, and you can also, they're also going to be having iTunes in the Windows 10 store. And with Visual Studio, you're also going to be able to create, I didn't quite understand it, but with the combination of Visual Studio and some other iOS app, you can pair your iPhone or iOS device to your computer, and you can natively develop iOS apps in a Windows environment if you choose. So, again, wrapping it up here is Microsoft's openness. They're like, hey, you want to do stuff? You want to use Microsoft stuff? Sure, go ahead. Use it on a computer. Use it on your iPhone. Use it on your Android device. You want to create stuff for other platforms, but using our dev environment? Sure, why not? Here, we got it working with Visual Studio. You want to have 3 different flavors of Linux installable with one touch or with one click, basically, in the Windows 10 store? Sure, that's coming too. Ubuntu and a couple other flavors of Linux, you're just going to be able to install directly from the Windows 10 App Store. So, yeah, it's so crazy looking back at how, 5-10 years ago, how Microsoft used to be, like, oh, developers, but, they're looking at, like, the Steve Ballmer era. Like, it's a totally different company, and it's just, I think, a lot better for it. So, very interested to see how things are going to continue on. And they even teased, especially with this augmented virtual reality stuff, they said, hey, definitely tune into E3. And we're definitely going to tell you some more about this stuff then. And as you can imagine, I will definitely be tuned in to that. I'm going to try to do probably a few videos around E3 again this year. So, maybe doing kind of my thoughts on each day for the end of each day, as I have done the past couple of years. And it's going to be really interesting because this year they're starting it super early. Like, I think there's a couple of conferences on Saturday. There's 2 or 3 on Sunday. And then I think there's a couple on Monday, and then Nintendo they're doing their own digital event. I was hoping they would move it up too, just because then I would have a day off, but on that particular Monday. But it looks like I'll be back at work, so I'll have to catch up on the Nintendo stuff later, or somehow at work, just kind of under the radar, see if I can tune in maybe on my phone or something just to watch this event. But yeah, so I'm going to try to cover my the thoughts that I have for the different events there, and it should be a really interesting year because Nintendo's doing their own interesting thing. Microsoft, we really don't know, but now we're kind of getting a hint of this, at least for part of it, their virtual reality and augmented reality. We know they have their Scorpio coming up by the fall. Sony, I'm sure they just are going to keep pumping out games and more PSVR stuff. And for the PC, who knows? I mean, I know they're going to have their PC gaming event again, but should be an interesting few days. We're going to have, I mean, again, it's going to be this crazy few days, you've got, was it on the 5th? You have WWDC, and then starting on the 10th, I think then we start into our E3 festivities. So here we go. So anyway, yeah, that's just kind of my thoughts and kind of a few things I found out about the Microsoft Build event of the last couple of days. Some pretty interesting stuff. Some stuff I definitely want to check out. And like I said, there's a lot of stuff that's going to be coming for the channel. I've got a whole bunch of stuff already recorded. Stuff I'm going to record. Again, I'm going to be looking at all these other WWDC and E3 stuff, so there's going to be plenty of things to watch over the next short while and beyond. So thanks again for subscribing, 700 plus strong and counting. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you guys found it interesting, and follow me on Twitter at BGFH79. And until next time, I will talk to you guys again later.